Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining Informed Sense CSU chapter. Today we have a special guest, Karan Arora. He is a purchasing director from Procter& and Gamble. Let me introduce him and his background, and then we will go to the topic. So Karan is basically from National Institute of Industrial Engineering, Mumbai, who is also an alum. I did my master's from that. So he started as a regional, customer logistics manager. He was looking after some kind of uh, optimization in the supply chain, outbound and stuff. Then he moved to different aspects of supply chain roles, starting from demand planning, then distribution planning, sourcing and operations. He was handling key indirect purchases and transforming some recycling and repurposing programs to make zero waste and landfills. He then moved to Singapore. He had a role there to perform different sourcing operations. He came to Cincinnati in the year 2016. He led the digital transformation of Procter& and Gamble sourcing. Last week we had a Coupa Software's presentation by Dr. Madhav. So his source to pay transformation is completely on Coupa implementation. So you guys can have a connect. So right now is the purchasing director. He is looking after raw materials, manufacturing of all those Procter& and Gamble's oral care business. So right now he's located in Cincinnati. He's looking after this leading purchasing teams, and he's taking care of other advanced transformations in terms of source to pay digital transformation. I welcome Karan today to our presentation. In today's topic, he is going to discuss about global strategic sourcing. His experiences in the last 15 years, from demand planning to sourcing operations to cost optimization, and then developing vendors, strategic sourcing, is going to give a complete summary of all these topics, and he's going to show two of his case studies, how in Procter& and Gamble they went for this digital transformation using Coupas and software or other software platforms. So before I hand over to Karan, I request all the participants to open your camera, open your shutters, so that we'll have a group picture. And then I will leave the stage to Karan to take the session. So on your count, you can take the picture. You are on mute, yeah.
Everyone's ready?
Chinmay, Alexander.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take 3, 2, 1, 0. All set. Go.
Got it? Okay, thanks, Karan. It's all yours now.
Okay. Yeah, guys, I need to see. I did not realize that right now I'm taking care of North America direct material purchases, raw materials, in some cases pack materials as well. I also am responsible for external manufacturing, which is we work a lot closer to our contract manufacturing partners to get products, finished products directly buying from them for our brands. So that's a big portion of our spend in the business unit I work in P&G. So I manage around nearly, say, $500 million of spend. In total, I have some global responsibilities as well, where I lead so to say, the chemicals organization for North America for delivering some key objectives on savings and supply chain resiliency for our business unit. So that brings a lot of night calls and early morning calls, but it's a very good role that I have in terms of interacting with more people across the globe in our oral care business unit. So Srinivasan, you should have my PPT now if you can bring it up.
Is it visible?
So, yep, that's great. Okay, so yeah, so thanks Srinivasan, and thanks guys for adjusting this. So today I'm going to talk about strategic sourcing. as Srinivasan had laid out this topic for me. Now, this is one thing which is core to what my functional work is. I belong to an organization inside P&G called Purchases. Now, Purchases is part of a broader supply chain function. I started my career in logistics, and I've done roles in planning, purchases, and even transportation operations and warehousing operations. So, but for the last, I would say, 8 years or so, I have shifted completely into purchases, and our core job is to deliver strategic sourcing for P&G. So let's go to through the agenda. I'll try to keep it simple. We'll start with what is really a goal of strategic sourcing. What is it all about? And then we'll talk about, so to say, the science and art. And this is a fun way to talk about it. And Srinivas and I talked about, okay, maybe we can talk in those jazzy words, but net, what are the hard points which go into doing strategic sourcing? What are the soft points which go into delivering the results out of that? We will talk about those. Then I'll talk 2 case studies, one from materials and one from the services buying. So there are 2 very different kind of things, like you're buying something tangible, physical versus a service. And I'll talk about how I applied the process, which I will talk about, to those cases. I might not be able to tell you exactly what they are, but I'll try to keep them as close to the real world as possible. So let's move to the next slide. Okay, so the goal of, if I try to define it in one line, is this is my summary, is personally not representative of anybody else. It's to build sustainable partnerships to deliver long-term competitive advantage via better cost, cash, and innovation. Cost, I think, is very clear to you guys. Cost is the price of the product you're buying. Cash is more, for example, if I buy something from a supplier and I pay them in 30 days, or if I pay them in 180 days, I'm improving the working capital for the company. So that is what we call cash. And then bringing solutions through innovation into the company, that is another thing we do. We are one of the 2 key functions in the whole company which look outside. One is sales and one is purchases. Yes, a lot of people work with other people outside the company, but these are 2 functions whose job is to look outside and bring solutions in. So that is how I define the role of strategic sourcing. It is not about tactically bargaining a deal out of it and pulling a fast one. It is about building partnerships which can sustain, which can live beyond beyond your own time in the role. So when I look back and see what happened, what I did 10 years back, and if that solution is still sustaining, then that is something to be proud about. Because in a company like P&G, we cannot be working with a mindset of being very short term. And in any company for that matter, the pace can differ, but ultimately the businesses which sustain, they always have built long-term relationships with their suppliers. Let's move to the okay. So then let's talk a little bit of the process about the how. So it starts net with data, and I think all of you won't be surprised. I mean, without knowing the data behind your spend, your transactions, you don't have any insights, or even the data about the market you are in, the suppliers, etc. So that all analytics has to come together for you to start defining which direction you want to go. So then comes the hard part, actually, which is sometimes I call the tip of the iceberg, like defining the strategy, like the few choices that you're going to make. That is the developing of the strategy. It looks a very small, short document, maybe 1 or 2 pages in our day-to-day work, but then the work which goes behind concluding to those choices is it is a lot, and we'll talk about it. Then executing those choices becomes like the next challenge, because you defining choices doesn't mean the uh, work will get done. The results have to come, and the choices have to be delivered. Yeah. And then one thing which becomes the art part of it is how do you build and manage the relationships with the suppliers and your internal stakeholders. So that matters a lot. I put it in a sequence, but relationships actually matter across the board, and it's kind of a bedrock of all the work that we do. So let's move to the next slide. So analytics, let's move to the next one. The process of how do you analyze, or how do you go about determining what we need to analyze is, so first of all, you need to define, okay, what is the problem of the business that you're trying to solve? That has to be really, really clear. So for example, if I'm a regular purchasing manager, I would just say, oh, let's deliver some savings. But my business might not give a damn about savings in that year because they want to grow. And then I'm trying to solve the wrong problem. I thought I did a good job, but the business will say, I wanted like 3 more suppliers because I needed capacity and you did not deliver. So that's very important, that you're very clear with your business that what problem is supposed to be solved for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You need to be clear about it. And then it determines, okay, what data then do I need? Okay, I want to build a new supply base, then I need to collect data about new suppliers. If I want to save money, I need to do should cost. And I need to understand how much I have been spending over the years, with whom, with which material or which service. And then that will determine, okay, how do I gather that data and derive insights out of it? So that becomes the next step then of analyzing it and then finding out, okay, what action do I take based on this data? So this whole process then inputs into the next stage of developing a sourcing strategy. So if you can go next. Oh, sorry, before that. So what to analyze is the market where you're playing in, the supplier base, transactions, benchmarking costs, should cost, total cost of ownership. All those analysis get done based on the data and the problem that you are trying to solve. Okay, next. Then comes the hard part of developing the strategy. And this is where a meat of the work lies. And the first thing to do here is to start with stakeholder engagement. So when I said that you need to know your business strategy, or you don't need to know your business priorities. So you need to ask yourself, okay, if I'm buying, let me take an example. If I'm buying salt, for like, there was a time when salt was used in many of our products. So then who will be impacted if I don't do a good job? Or whose results would I end up improving? So you need to be very clear who is your stakeholder, whether it's the supply chain VP or is it the business VP, or who is your stakeholder is supposed to be very clear. And you take you engage them by understanding what goals are they trying to achieve for the next 3-5 years, and then accordingly start making your own plans. Then you need to understand how would you create a competitive advantage for P&G or for your own company versus competition. So this doesn't mean, I'm not talking material here, I'm talking if I do something great for this material which goes into this product of P&G, how will that product behave better in the market versus the competing product? So that linkage needs to get clear. So in my job, for example, if you buy, say, silica, and if I do a good job in buying a better quality silica than my competition company, then we will be delivering a wow for the consumer versus competition, which will make us win. So I need to know that connection really well, because I'm also remembering for innovation while I'm trying to save money. Then I need to know my supply base. What are their capabilities? How much they can support us? Are they innovative? Are they viable long-term financially? So all those things need to be clear and understood very well while making the strategy. And there's some tools which I studied in my MBA class and like in MITI, which Srinivas was referring to, like SWOT and Porter and should cost. At that time, I used to think I will never use these things. Who uses them? But I can tell you SWOT and Porter are so fundamental in analyzing the market that we have and then our supply base, and then being able to razor sharp determine, okay, where the gaps are or where our strengths lies or weaknesses lies. That makes you think very well and then determine how to move forward on choices. Net, after all these things, gathering information, engaging the stakeholders, everything, analyzing, you need to be very clear on maybe 2 to 3 choices. That is my take. People sometimes have 5 defined choices. And they could be like, I have to clearly call out that would I work with one supplier? Would I work with multiple suppliers? Would I leverage scale buying? Would I do a consortium buying? Would I do an intervention in the market? Would I just move from product A to product B and shift the market entirely? What is that thing, those 2 or 3 big choices that I would make to deliver the business objectives of which can be saving, growth, innovation in the market? So that has to be really clear as an outcome of this process. And Srinivasan, I think I lost the camera somehow. I don't know why, but yeah, I'll keep going. Okay, then executing the strategy. So now that we say we define some choices that we will work in an with X number of suppliers and do this Y thing, and this is how we'll change the market or intervene in the market and but then you have to convert that into execution. So then the question comes again, who will help you in execution? Because they are not the same people who are giving you the business choices. The VP of the business is not going to tell you how to execute your strategy. So that's where we need to work with the working teams, which can be multifunctional, can be finance, can be operations, can be plant operations, can be demand planning. They can be multifunctional people who will help you execute your strategy. And then the tactics we use are, okay, if I determine that I'm going to work with one supplier, then I'm doing a negotiation with them ultimately, right? Because there is no bidding, there is no competition. But if I have multiple suppliers, I might want to do bids and have them compete with each other, or bid and then negotiate. So all combinations are possible, but then that has to be defined very clearly. What are you going to do? And then we have our own process, standardized tools. Actually, we use Coupa's tools for bidding in a huge way. They have a simple Coupa bidding tool, and they also have a very the industry-leading Coupa sourcing optimization bidding tool, which is highly, highly sophisticated. So we use those kind of tools to do that work of actively sourcing, like doing that execution of choices by bidding, negotiating, or combination. And then do we need to change internally something? Like, for example, if I'm going to say, okay, you received the product in a sack, but I want you to receive in a tanker, which means my plant needs to change the way they have received product today. So that can look simple, but I can tell you it's hugely complicated because our plants operate in a very, very tight and a very efficient manner. And they've designed a certain way. To make any change to the design of a plant is highly important. If you overlook that and you awarded business based on a wrong assumption, you will not be able to execute it. So you need to know what changes you got to deliver internally with your internal stakeholders to implement the new deal that you're negotiating. And then all of them, when it's done, you have to sign a contract. You need to make it black and white, issue a PO, and then you track performance. So that you know what's going on, and if there is an improvement needed, then you do it. So from this, this is how the outcome comes from this execution, that there are tangible business results like savings, bringing an innovative material or a service in solution to the business, or getting extended payment terms. So all those things come to life by this process when you go to the market and then engage your suppliers and execute with them. Any questions till now? I know we got the question at the end, but I'm okay if somebody wants to jump in as well. I generally don't like to keep talking one way. Okay.
I mean,
so
if any participants have any questions, please unmute and you can ask questions. Sorry, go ahead, Karan.
Okay, cool. Then, so this is what we talked till now is a lot of it is very, like you can write down and you can do it, you execute, but then most of it was very much like a science. Like even negotiation is a combination of science and art. Yes, you need to have a art of negotiation, but then it's also a lot of science that we put behind it. My negotiation planning template, which we have, which is proprietary of P&G, is like maybe 10 pages long. So any major negotiation, we just have to put a very much thought behind, okay, what are the motivators of a supplier of P&G? What do we want to do? So it's a lot of science which goes into it. But then it also comes down to, then when it comes to human interactions, then the art starts coming in as well. So, and we have also tried to define a structure around it, because you can't just, you don't have enough resources to treat every supplier in the same way. That's next to impossible. So we need to be very sure which supplier relationships are the most critical and which are not. So think ABC, like A category suppliers are probably the most important due to higher spend, or they're highly innovative, they're critical to the growth of the company, etc. And then B and C, and then you will deal with them differently. The most important supplier of P&G, my VP needs to meet them, say, once a year for sure. My bottom supplier, maybe I won't even meet them once a year because it's more transactional. So that's the reality, that we need to make sure that we have the right sizing of the relationship criticality defined, and not a peanut butter approach. And then comes to like any supplier sometimes started new in the company. So you have to make sure they're introduced into the company in the right way, onboarded well, and their performance is managed over time. So they get the right feedback, they improve. Not every supplier can start working right away very well with any company. There is a cultural difference, there is a process difference. It takes time to stabilize. And that reality, we know with all the experience, and that's why we have the right processes in place to manage their performance, coach them, guide them. Then we collaborate and partner with them for the importance of the business. And then, do I need to have a joint business planning with them? Do I need to do any developmental work with them? So all those things get defined by the importance that they have and the solutions that they have for the business. We use very specific, again, some proprietary templates for P&G, for planning with them, scorecards, site level execution agreements, where they commit to certain parameters of performance. So those are the tools which are used to then manage their performance. But a lot of it is just the art of dealing with people and making sure you promise and deliver on your promises, expect that from them. And then it also comes down to supporting each other. Like, I had a very good experience working with our suppliers where we had amazing relationships. And during COVID, I can say nearly we had no issues, if I can take the liberty of saying that, because of the strong partnerships that we had with them. So it went beyond the money that we paid. It's about that, the personal effort that the people take to protect your business. So that does not come with only black and white performance management. It comes with people management, helping them deliver their goals, understand what they are trying to deliver for their company, and try to find a win-win solution for them. If you show that gesture, if you show that in your actions, your relationship becomes better and better. If you help grow business with them, generally speaking, it will improve your relationships. And do it with the utmost ethical behaviors, and that's something which we all in PNG take pride in as well. That we can take it for granted that all our people will deal with our suppliers with utmost professionalism and ethics. So that also helps build an image of the company that when we deal with this company, we will always be treated fairly. So that is a confidence that all our suppliers can have, and that goes beyond the hard points. It's all the art of managing it, the relationship with them. So that's something which is very, very important. And I have seen time and again in multiple geographies I have worked in, those relationships are completely beyond the money transactions happening between the two companies. So, okay, so let's move to the next slide.
Karan, before we move to the case studies, I have a couple of questions. Probably if I shoot now, it will be better.
Sure.
Okay. First question is about this marketing and procurement. These two teams. I mean, procurement from PNG, marketing team from the suppliers. Those relationships are the ones we are talking about, right? So apart from discounting, is there a way how these people compete each other and come to a common ground? Like marketing people, they want more sales, they want more profit and more revenue. Whereas procurement team, they will be targeting less cost. I mean, they want more service levels, more creditor days, and their objective is completely inverse of the others one. I mean, the marketing's objective and procurement team's objective will be vice versa, opposite, right? Apart from discounting and stuff, how this relationship should be made on?
Right. Okay, so first of all, it's not only sales and marketing. We also deal with the technical teams. So, But yes, largely speaking, you're right. So the way I define it for my suppliers is and I'm smiling because I just concluded some negotiations where we were talking similar things. So both of us are coming from two different spectrums. So they are coming from a spectrum of increasing profit, increasing sales. We are coming from a spectrum decrease in margin or get savings, so which will lead to decrease of their sales. So we are coming from two different extremes. But keep in mind that if I go back to what I said earlier, that I try to understand, okay, Mr. Supplier, I want to deliver, say, 10% savings, and I want you to move from 100 days of payment terms to 200 days. That is my objective. So I have to be very transparent about it. And then there is, and I also need to know and ask, what is your objective? So we all know there are competing objectives, but more often than not, we are able to then come together and say, okay, if this is what is required, but then what is possible? So it's not that I will get, say, 10% saving from everybody. I'll get from some, sometimes I'll get 20% from somebody. But ultimately, I have to manage my portfolio of suppliers to deliver my objectives. And similarly, the salesperson also thinks I have to manage a portfolio of customers to deliver their objectives. So if PNG is one of, say, buying a lot of particular material and we are like maybe 30% of their business, they would like to make more money, but they also know that we are one of the least risky business that they have. So think about it that way. So they can afford, or they will prefer to keep working with us which is a stable business, maybe with a lower margin while having higher margin with somebody else. So they play their portfolio as well, and we play our own portfolio as well. So that it's not a single one answer for every relationship. It will differ in the way it happens for different relationships. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are follow-up questions coming up, but I'll reserve for the finishing mode. The second question I wanted to ask is with respect to this site level agreements you mentioned. I consider that as a service level agreements. Suppose you have a well-established supplier who is supplying to PNG for so many years. If suppose by chance they are missing out on some service level agreements, I mean, instead of 30 days, they took 40 days. Or suppose some of their supply, they had some quality issues. For a regular supplier versus a new supplier, how PNG handles, I mean, when it is violating service level agreements and some quality, defects.
So every agreement or every contract we sign, there is a portion of the SLAs are captured in that and are signed off. And then there is a process, which is a governance, third-party governance process that we have to track their performance, and we scorecard it. And if they now are not delivering, so generally speaking, what we do is we realize the trends and then we work with them collaboratively to improve it. So I'll take an example. So during COVID, for example, a lot of suppliers were not able to meet all the service targets. Like in my case, my contract manufacturers were not able to do so. And there was a genuine reason behind it. So then we worked out a different plan. Say, okay, with that constraint that people were not able to come to work, so how would they manufacture everything on time? And if they have a labor shortage, we have to understand that. And then we worked with them to manage through that period very closely, and how would we maximize the potential outcome, and then go from there. So that was the scenario where we understand the problem and we work together. And then they improved and they came back. Now, there are regular scenarios where sometimes performance drops. So again, we work with them and we give them time to recover. Like generally speaking, then if it is a small issue, then it's on a day-to-day basis, there are processes and meetings in place which will take care of it. But if it's a drastic drop, we go to something called a hypercare. So then hypercare can depend on the frequency of meetings, and tracking will depend on the extent of the issue. So if it is for a material or a service which is so critical to the business that our business will stop, I'll have a daily hypercare, like maybe even multiple times a day. If that, like, I'm talking very extreme, but a daily hypercare or a weekly hypercare or a bi-weekly hypercare. So then we define that why are we going into hypercare? What are the objectives of which is to improve from on these 3 parameters. And then when they will improve to these levels, then I will declare hypercare is ending. So that is how then we go for those scenarios where performance drops, and we work with them. Generally speaking, these 2 processes deliver. Sometimes they don't. And then in an extreme case, there can be, if there is such a performance issue and there is lack of collaboration and improvement from the supplier, we can put them on a performance improvement plan, so to say. And in a very, very extreme cases, just sever that relationship and move to another supplier. But that last scenario, I have personally not experienced much. Generally, that doesn't happen.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience before we move to the case studies he's going to present?
Hi, Karan. I have one question.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, P&G, we all know, is a giant, and the giants have some social responsibilities, right? So, what does P&G do to, support and develop small level businesses? That is, your small level suppliers. Do you have some plans for that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We actually have a program called Supplier Citizenship, we call it, and which has various elements to it. So to support small and medium enterprises, to support women-owned enterprises. So and then minority-owned sub-enterprises, we actually, in my spend tracking platform, I can filter out how much of my spend right now, as of today, from the last, 3-5 years, is with any of such supplier, which are a minority-owned or a small business or a women-owned supplier. So that we take it very seriously, and we do have a very robust program in place to track and enable. And while with the whole intent of developing the community and taking that responsibility, because if we believe that we have to be inclusive of all consumers, and if we support such businesses, such consumers will benefit from the products which we make, and we will benefit from their business. So that's actually a very solid. I can actually share some links with you guys to where you can find more details about our program as well in the public websites. Yeah, but a good question. Yeah.
All right, then let's move on then, Karan. I'll go to the next slide.
Yep. Okay. So case study 1. So this one, if you go to the next slide. So this is about in my one of my recent work where I'm talking about buying a material. By material, you think something which goes into a product, and when you buy that product, it's inside that product as an ingredient. So that's a material I'm talking about. And in the relationship or in the supplier relationship that we were buying from them for like, I don't know, ages, like maybe a decade. But it was kind of an adversarial relationship. We were getting millions of dollars of hurt every year, like or maybe $1 million, so whatever. And it was not a good scenario to be in. And my team took over that spend after many such years of hurt, and then the supplier will just pass on the hurt, and we were dealing with them very tactically. And it was a very weird thing because it is we're buying tens of millions of dollars worth of product, and it was actually surprising to me that we did not have a good relationship with such a supplier. And with that supplier themselves, they are a highly, highly respected company, and they are probably as big or bigger than P&G actually. So it is a critical material for our business. It's high spend. So that was the scenario we were in. So clearly, if you go back to what the process I defined, clearly we were not doing strategic sourcing. So we had not so good relationship with a supplier which was supplying us a strategic material. We were we were spending a lot of money with them, and we were getting hurt of, we were getting upcharges or incremental prices on a unit basis every year. So that is probably the worst scenario that you can be from a sourcing standpoint. So when I came into the job, in this job, and we took over that spend, as some reorganization happened, so the first thing we did that we need to fix the relationship. We need to make sure we understand what that company is all about, and they understand what are our goals. So that was the first thing we did. I visited their site. We had a long day of understanding each other and knowing the businesses, what do they sell other than what we were talking about, where can be the opportunities to grow for them, adjacent to this, adjacent materials or more. Are there opportunities to do even innovation collaboration like co-development, etc., with them, because they are clearly capable of doing it. And P&G also has a lot of R&D horsepower. So all that conversation just opened up the minds, like, what were we doing till now? So why were we having a yearly kind of contract without much discussion? And why were we not looking at things in totality from both sides? So that unlocking happened first year when we came in. Like in few months, we had a bid. We saw them not passing so much hurt. They were still not saving, but the trajectory started changing. And then they also had a change in management. Then we kept making sure that we are always connected to them. So their new leadership came, they redefined their strategies, we met again and made sure our goals are clear to each other. So fast forward few more months, we ended up having more conversation about what is possible, what more materials to genuinely explore together. And then we got into the negotiation season again. And guess what? After all this, when we got into the negotiation, the first thing we saw that they did not propose any hurt. So that was the first time in like 5 years of history that I know about that they did not propose a hurt to P&G. And then they actually came up with other suggestions on how do we improve the supply chain of that material so you can get some saving, how do we become more efficient, etc. And in the meantime, another thing happened during COVID. We collaborated really well because there was, as I said, this is a critical material for the business. So that close working happened that we shared that, okay, we have this need. P&G is an essential business called out by the government. We need to keep producing. How can you help? And they came with help more than I expected. And that was like they actually set up a separate warehouse nearby our plant to make sure there is enough inventory in case their plant shuts down. they still have a month worth of stock to give it to us. So that was something I was actually thinking of building in my own plant. They actually offered without any cost to just do it themselves. So that was unexpected. And that was another milestone in the relationship, which showed me that they are willing to do more and they are willing to walk the talk on when they say that, oh, P&G, we want a better relationship with you. So that happened from both sides. We supported them well in fixing our supply chain and removing the rework for them. So that collaboration over the period of 12 months helped us a lot, because when we went into the negotiation with them again, it was all very collaborative. So it was like, okay, guys, we have proposed this. What are you looking to achieve? And then there was a healthy conversation about, okay, the range I told you, right, coming from two different extremes, how do we come together in between and deliver for both the companies? So that helped us deliver for the first time in 5 years saving, while we helped them grow the business in another material, and we were actually able to deliver savings even in that material, but they gained more revenue. So as a net, not only one of the biggest materials delivered saving results, way better than expected, but it also delivered higher business growth for them, even in a total sense for their company, and became a win-win solution. And now actually it has led to a place where we will have a very healthy ongoing partnership. We have already charted a path for our companies for the next 2 to 3 years. So that was like I would say in a 15 months time, coming from a very, I would say bad place to a super positive relationship where both companies are ready to work together and help deliver each other's goals. So that was something which now I'm talking mostly about relationship here because that was probably the biggest turnaround, but a lot other things went into it. So before we went into talking to them, we had to understand how this materials market works. What is the ship cost? What are the market realities of such material? What are the market realities of the suppliers who are playing in this market? What are their input costs? And are we asking something which is unreasonable? Because if the input costs are going up every year and we are expecting a savings, we might not be doing the right thing. What should be the profit that they should earn? So those kind of things we did from a data analytics standpoint to understand the market, understand and they're a listed company, so I could analyze their annual report and understand where they're going with their company. So all that analysis was done as well. And then we called out clear choices. What are we going to do is in terms of working with them and collaborating with them and collaboratively negotiating with them to deliver results. So that was also called out as a choice. And so that, it seems very simple, right? Like, oh, he will work with one supplier and negotiate with them. Yes. But I can tell you, to define that choice and stick to that choice is not easy, because during negotiations, not everything goes like smoothly every time. There were times you will get into not a heated, but a very firm conversations. And then you start wondering, okay, did I make the right choice? But then you need to stick to your choices which you made, which is based on data, which is based on insights, which is based on your belief in the relationship. So that we did, and were able to come on the other side with a better result for both the companies. So that whole exercise of data, defining clear choices, doing a negotiation in terms of execution, and then we now are obviously signing off POs, etc. So all that process was followed very well here, but relationship was the biggest, so to say, of the turnaround. So I know I did not take the numbers and the name, but it's a real world example which I just worked on a few months back. Any questions or thoughts from anybody?
I have one question. I'm really interested in this negotiations part. So does it depend upon the relationship of the supplier, or do you have a standard tactics to standard strategy to negotiate with everyone? How does it work?
Oh, it is very, very, very different with different suppliers. So we do have a standard way to, a standard template to plan, but then what you plan is going to differ by market, by supplier. So if I'm dealing with, in this case, with a big company versus I'm dealing with somebody in a different, say, a supplier who has a patent, and we are dependent on the patented product from them. So that's a different negotiation. I cannot play hardball at all. Or I can, I mean, it depends on, again, on the relationship, but you know what I'm saying. So it's going to be, the plan would be made for differently for different suppliers. Now, when I say the plan means that, okay, what are my objectives? Do I know about their objectives? What is my assessment of their objectives? So what should I target as savings or as cash target or as service improvement targets? Or I need to lay that out. I need to plan around and then make sure that it's thought through correctly and it doesn't is not illogical when I'm talking about it. So what we do is to go through that planning very thoroughly, especially on the biggest negotiations, which we do. And it is completely tailored to the relationship. Like even in the same material I'm buying, I will talk differently with X supplier versus Y, because their goals are different. My goal is the same, probably, but their goals are different. Their locations of their factories might be different, may not be in US also. So you need to make sure that you are accounting for that in the negotiations you're doing. So if somebody is supplying to you a bulk material from China versus you're buying from here, if you expect the Chinese supplier and the North American supplier to charge you the same, then you're mistaken. That won't happen, generally speaking. So their costs are different, their labor costs are different, their utility costs are different. So you need to know that and tailor your negotiation accordingly. The last thing, and I'll leave it with this thought, the last thing you want to do is to ask for something which is so preposterous that the other person stops taking you seriously. You don't want to do that. You need to know what you're asking for. Does that answer your question, Majid?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
In the slides, you have a word called million. You had a phrase called $1 million of hurt every year. What does that mean with hurt? Just wonder.
So say I was buying I was spending say $100 million on something, and okay, let me take it differently. Let me say I was buying something for $1 per kg every year, and I was buying a lot of kgs. So it's millions of dollars of total spend. But the next year, my supplier comes in and tells me, oh, tomorrow onwards, I'll charge you $1.10. So that's a 10% of charge. Now on a per unit, it's only 10 cents, but if that 10 cents is multiplied by 1 million kgs, then it's a lot of millions of dollars. So that is what I mean and say that they were giving us incremental pricing. So it hurts our bottom line. When we call it hurt, because it's hurting our bottom line every year. So year on year, they were increasing prices, while we had a reason to believe that they should not be doing that, and they can still make money.
Okay, Mr. Hi, my name is Ashwin. I have a question on what you were saying. So as a rule of thumb for any bomb material, that is something that you're using in the article that you're producing, there are more than one supplier that you have, right? So you have A, B, C, D. For most.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It depends. Sometimes we simply can't because it's a very unique and special material. Sometimes there is no other option in the market. And sometimes we have been lazy and never got a second supplier. So that also happens.
Okay.
But yeah, we try, to your point, logically we should, and we are trying our best to get more than one supplier for as many materials as possible so that we have a backup.
Right. So here it comes to the point of both localization as well as supplier development as such.
Mm-hmm.
So you have an established supplier right now in hand, and you want to localize your supply chain as such, wherein you reduce both your cost as well as your lead time for the material, right? So in this case, this person the new person who's coming in is someone who's inexperienced in the particular field. How long would you give them, like based on, suppose they are very capable of producing the product and you start working with them, how do you phase out the existing supplier or like distribute the market share between these two?
So typically we will not phase out the existing supplier. One of the principles we follow is that we give a lot of say weightage to the incumbent supplier, the existing supplier, because one, they have supported our business for a while. Two, they have delivered helped us deliver our growth or whatever. So if I bring a new supplier, so I think you had 2 or 3 questions in your question. So one, how long would I give them to stabilize? So that typically we would like to have suppliers where we don't have to do too much of hand holding. But we always know that people will take time to stabilize because they would understand our processes and deliver, etc. But the most important thing to do with any new supplier is, first of all, making sure they can make the product to our specifications. We cannot have a material, or for that matter, a service delivered which is not as part of specs or requirements. They have to be clear, and they need to deliver that. In case of materials, we generally take months of time to qualify their material. So if they're coming it to us for the first time, they will send us their material. We'll test them, maybe put them on extended testing if it's a more critical material, and then if it doesn't meet the spec, we will tell them, and then they will do it again. They will respec their product and send again. That iteration tells us that they can do it or not. And then that helps to get the door properly, but it takes time to stabilize. Generally speaking, for a lot of people who are existing in the market already, they accommodate within a few months because they have that habit of dealing. They are just accommodating to our own electronic, like for example, receiving electronic orders, electronic invoicing. So they might be just adjusting to those systems. Otherwise, they have to receive an order, ship it, and get acknowledgement, get paid. So that process, it takes few months. Now it is becoming more and more standard, Ashwin, because as the electronic systems are becoming more and more standard in the industry, like we use a system like Ariba, or you might have heard of what you call for services, etc. We use Coupa. So those are very standard industry-wide systems which make this onboarding of new suppliers easier for us. So that's how. And then if a supplier is developing something new, they will take more time to stabilize, because if they develop something new, their own production systems will take time to stabilize. Sometimes existing suppliers make a new variation of a material. That takes time to stabilize, because initially when we will test with them, say somebody's making a newer version of X material, and we are working with them for it, they will first make it on a pilot line. They will not just change their production systems just overnight for it. Once we say, oh, this is good, and I'm ready to pay you X for it, that deal is done, then they switch their entire production line, say, to that specification. But that might take a little bit more time because it's a change. Any change takes time, basically. So those things will happen, but it is, again, dependent on the complexity of materials. If you're buying salt, it's probably easy. But if you're buying a highly specialized polymer and you're tweaking it, it's not simple, because a small change in the link of a carbohydrate or whatever can have a very different result on your final product.
True.
So depending on what we are buying, the timings can differ dramatically. Does that answer your questions?
It answers.
Or do you have a?
So, one of the other questions that I had asked was, how do you distribute between two suppliers once they develop? Based on what do you make that decision?
So initially, as a thumb rule, we always start the new supplier with a minority share. And typically, I would say anywhere, the starting point, a decent starting point would be a 10% share to come in. And then if they are good enough, then we can keep increasing in the next round of the negotiations, etc. It's very rare for a completely new supplier to start with a majority share or more than 50%. If there is an existing supplier who supplies something else, I might give them 30-40% to start with, but it depends on their knowledge of P&G and our risk taking ability for that material. So again, I'll take an example of salt. If I'm buying salt, I will take more risk, and because for me what matters is cost, right? Because it's such a commodity. So a new supplier also might gain more share than usual, like usually the 10-20% that we start with. I can give them 30-40%. But if it is a specialized material, I will not take the risk, because all savings will go down the drain if the material screws up. If the business doesn't exist, saving doesn't matter. So that's why we take baby steps with them. And at 10-20% is my thumb rule starting point for generally most of the suppliers.
Right. So adding on to this, like if you have multiple manufacturing locations, certain suppliers are closer to certain locations. Do you switch over entirely at one location while giving another supplier your location? Something like that.
So location ultimately matters, because a nearer location can define like responsiveness would be more if you are nearby somebody, but it ultimately is total cost. So if a supplier who is 1,000 miles away is cheaper, then I would make that choice that I might generally try to go cheaper. If they're both the same quality, then I'll try to go to the cheaper supplier and accommodate with more inventory, basically.
Right. Understood. Thank you.
Because cost of capital is generally very low, right? In the United States, the cost of capital and for a big corporate generally is very, very low. So cost of carrying inventory is very small as compared to sometimes the cost differential between two suppliers.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. If no more questions, then I can talk about another case. Okay. So this was for a case where I was into buying some services, and we had a great supply base, amazing suppliers. We had multiple suppliers, so they were all backups and everything in most cases. They were providing great service to us, and then people had delivered great saving results over the last few years. When I came to that role, I'm like, what am I going to do better? Because it was all everybody winning CEO awards and everything, great. And but the thing was, we were doing things at par with the industry, so we were as good as the industry. And then the question became, okay, how do we become better than the industry? How do you change the industry itself? And this is when I was like, I don't know, 5 years in the company. So that's something which my manager at that time challenged me to think about. Okay, what would you do to make it better? So we are doing nothing wrong. We're doing great, but we are not better than on cost or service than the industry. Many of our competitors are able to do what we are doing. So in that case, what I did think through is that, okay, how do I change the industries? Then the question. So then what I ended up doing is analyzed again, the analysis goes back to analysis. Okay, if I am taking these services from these 15 suppliers, am I using the right type of service from the right supplier? So the mix, basically. And then if I switch to a more expensive or premium service, but I get a better outcome in terms of I don't have to, say, for example, somebody's making it up, billing me as a consultant, and I get a higher quality consultant, but that person is able to do the same job in an hour versus 10 hours of the cheaper guy. Then the more expensive person is highly productive and cheaper for me to do actually go with. So that is what I essentially did. And when I did that, I did that across the board. It makes sense internally. I had to align a lot of people because I was saying, okay, let's choose the expensive services options, but we will be delivering better outcomes due to that. So there was a lot of internal selling to do in giving people confidence, because that was not something the industry used to do. So when we did that, actually, I received, so my suppliers come back to me, and it was a funny moment that, okay, your competition thinks that you are being a moron, actually. And I'm like, okay, do you think that I'm doing something stupid? My supplier told me, and I remember, not a chance. They will follow you in a year. And that's what happened. So, so the whole insight here was that we were able to determine that we were using the industry standard service solutions, while there were more premium but more productive solutions available in the market, which we were not using, and we were just basically using the base level of service like a commodity, while there were more value-added options available, which will give me more bang for the buck. And then that analysis was basically done by marrying various parts of data. I actually remember using a simple solver function in Excel. That was my core analytic tool at that point of time. Now we have so much Power BI and Tableau and everything where I can build dashboards myself. But at that time, Excel was what we had. And but that single insight drove the whole change. And then we ended up changing the industry. People who laughed at us were finally converting to what we were trying to do, and just shifted the whole paradigm of the industry. In this case, I was in India, so that's where it happened. So that's the analytics part of it. Now, what it required, now the core was that insight from that analytics, which I derived and then changed things. But I had to also take my suppliers along, because they had to then invest in capabilities, because if they're providing the core services and they have certain number of resources available to deliver that, they did not have resources to deliver a premium service as much as I needed. So they had to invest, but then doing a joint planning with them to make sure they are collaborating and they are working, and their business planning is taking into account the needs where and they understand where I'm going with it, and then also putting the stake in the ground that we will support them. And then taking them along with our relationship mattered a lot. So all the good relationships with my predecessors had built, and I built on top of them, I was able to then carry them along with me, basically, and they carried me along in a way that helped me deliver that change in the market and for my company. So that was, again, the second part was about how relationships then mattered, because yes, on paper, my plan looked amazing, but sometimes the plans on paper are not taking everything into account. They can fail. But also, I was pretty sure about what I was talking about. But then beyond a point, what mattered was when the person believed in me versus only in my plan. So that relationship mattered. And then I remember a conversation with a supplier who I actually increased the share for, and because they were really, really good on service. And they asked, but they were very expensive on cost. And I said, okay, what do you want? They said, I wanted to double my business. I said, okay, I'll tell you what you should charge me, and I can help you deliver that. So those kind of things we did, and also collaboratively, and then helped develop the business of various suppliers at the same time. And the good fortunate thing that I heard was our business was growing by double digits in India, so I had growth to give, which always helps the cause. So that is another insight, that with all this business planning, one thing they knew, they will keep growing. And then second thing they knew, P&G will help and support them and take care of them. So those things about the relationships helped to manage that change, or actually sell and execute that change in the industry. So I know I'm a bit cryptic about it, and I felt myself talking weird, but net from a standpoint of learning, It was the data insights, the relationships, and knowledge of the industry, which helped me understand, find a solution which is better in the industry, and execute it with my relationships and internal partnerships on bringing it to life. So that, again, if I go back to the last case study or the processes which I talked about, the 4 steps which I defined, is the same thing. So if I try to just contrast between the 2 case studies, one is for materials, one is for service. One, we had a bad relationship, bad everything. One, we had great everything. But the process which I followed, analyze, make a strategy, execute it, manage your relationships, and leverage your relationships, is exactly the same. So it doesn't matter what you are buying actually, fundamentally. If you practice the process well, if you're very thorough on practicing your process of strategic sourcing, it really does not matter where you're operating on. Now, some industries demand thoroughness more than others. Like a raw material job which I'm doing, it demands me to be very thorough, and more than a transportation assignment I have done back in India. But the process is the same. The process of doing a high quality strategic sourcing is the same. So any questions, guys? Hello,
Karan, I would like to ask a question. If no one is asking a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is regarding negotiation. Suppose like P&G, there are other players in the market. They are customers for a particular supplier. And it is very difficult to ask for some cost reductions or some kind of improvements in the service from the supplier because he is giving the same thing across other different companies in the industry. So in this particular scenario, how Procter & Gamble can take steps? Because supplier will anyway say that this is the standard, this is the cost, we cannot go beyond this particular price. So this is what we will provide as the service level agreements and so on. So in this particular scenario, how P&G will tackle and what kind of strategies they adopt in the negotiation?
So what you're defining is like, if it's a complete commodity, many suppliers make it. It's something which is which is not, no one guy can add any value to it, just the same thing which everybody sells kind of thing. In that case, we then go at the market, you generally speaking. But then if you have a scale advantage, like, okay, yes, it is the same thing that you're selling to the 20 other people, but if I'm buying 1/3 of your material or half of your material, I deserve a little bit better price. So then it becomes a volume game, which we try to leverage. So that's a lever that we can pull more often than not, given the size of our business. So that's something which we always try to do. And then try to see if there is any other value add that we can derive with supply chain optimization, etc. So there is always this mindset of continuous improvement that is inculcated in every supply chain professional in P&G. That, okay, even if you think that you got everything, but just always have a mindset, there is always a room for improvement. We call it scraping the barrel approach or continuous improvement, call it whatever, but that's the mindset that we have. We do, for example, analysis of losses every year in all our plants, in all our supply chains, with all my materials that we buy, we do that and relook at everything every year. So for example, with one of my contract manufacturers, we did this loss analysis last year and we found, like, ideally if every loss goes away, we have an opportunity of say $10 million. And these are the projects which we'll do. And these are like ideal numbers, but we can recover some part of it. So now this year, when the question comes that, okay, should we do that exercise again? A lot of people said, nah, we did very thoroughly last year. But we said, no, let's do it. We have to have this discipline of doing it. And guess what? We found $3 more million on top of what we had found last year, because things change. We learn new things. We find new things. There is generally speaking, a complicated supply chain around everything we buy. So that's something which we expect, and this is something we also tell our suppliers, that we'll continue to ask you for these optimization opportunities, because we believe there is always some room, and that culture basically, it helps us keep fueling savings for the company. So think about it this way: we launch a new product with a packaging which is new. You thought you did the best job, but then next year somebody will realize, oh, if I tweak the packaging a little bit, you'll save $500,000 or $200,000. So then we make sure we do gather those ideas year on year. So that's a continuous improvement culture that we have to keep driving those things with such suppliers. But there are a bunch of suppliers, like you said, who are selling us very commoditized. Even buying labor, for that matter, is, what do you think? Labor is commodity in a way, right? And we have to we get tapped to the market. The market, if market goes up, if Amazon is paying more or somebody else is paying more, we get impacted. So what is the solution then? The solution is, how can I automate something? Can I decrease the usage? Can I make a person who's working on the line more productive, so they can do the more and more work in the same time? So time on motion study, the age-old thing we learned in NITI a lot, right? So even that, we do that. And then automation. These days, a lot of it's not easy to automation is not easy to achieve. It's easy to talk about, but even those projects are then done with capital investment. Okay, I eliminated the need of 10 people. So those kind of things, then you end up doing differently. So if I'm buying a material that is a commodity, can I reduce the usage of that material without impacting the performance of the product? So that is another way we try to save money. So there is always something which can be done to improve cost structure. That's our inherent belief.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Guys?
I have one question.
Okay. Yeah.
Talking to many industrial professionals, and via informed seminars, I've understood that to do something, or to, in your particular example, you change something, right? So you need money for that. So in your career, was there any situation where the management denied you that kind of funds, and you had very limited fund, and you, managed something out? How was your experience on that?
So you'd never get the funds that you ask for. That's one thing you can assume. Now, having jokes apart, but yeah, so there is always we always, with all the way I defined our attitude of, there are always opportunities to be had. So you can imagine our teams will always have more ideas than resources to execute them. By resources can be people, can be money. So there are always then choices to be made, that, okay, you make a business case of what investments of money or people that you want from your management. You propose that, you get some approvals, you don't get some approvals based on the ROI of every project that you're talking about. So you need to be very clear of what you're asking for, what will it deliver, and how will it impact the bottom line. So that is how it happens. And the other thing is, you can say, oh, as a shareholder, that why don't you do all the projects if they have a better ROI than one? So why don't you do all of them? Another thing to think about is that you cannot really execute hundreds of projects in an organization. You need to also be very strategic about how much work you try to bite on. If you try to do too many things at the same time, you will not get anything done. So that's another thing behind, it's not that your management is denying you funding for a great opportunity. They gave you funding for something which made sense, has highest of the ROIs, is most critical to the business, and is the right amount of work for the organization to manage in a certain period of time, typically a year. So that is how I think about it. But yes, there are times when I say, oh, I asked for so much, but I ended up getting only a part of it. But that's the logic behind it. It's it's not a illogical thing that happens. But then, even if they want to help, let's say, and even if we can do that work, sometimes the pressures of the business don't allow us to. So today we are fortunately in a situation where we are doing very good as a company, and we have now for the last maybe a couple of years performed very well. But there was a time when things were not so good, and we were in a downturn, and we were trying to find the winning ways. So things were not easy. So there were always constraints because we could not afford to invest unless we really were sure. And then you're never fully sure, by the way. Like if you say, oh, I need a person, I'll deliver $5 million savings. It's easy to say, maybe you had a plan, but in a year's time, market went south. What will you do? US government imposed 25% duties on Chinese products. Cannot do anything. Your supply base is suddenly infeasible. So those things do happen. Even if you had the best of the plans, they can get haywire. So that's another thing that happens, that during the tight times, the management has to also right size how much can we afford to do. So it depends on the situation of the company. Fortunately, for now, we are good. But yeah, so those are the thoughts I have on that question.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Okay, one last question before we sign off the day. I mean, let me take this privilege. Suppose year on year, the industry is growing. This is growing even for our suppliers, even our own manufacturing company or an organization. So every company, I mean, because of inflation and other economic indicators, we are supposed to increase the price of our product. The same thing even our suppliers will do. We as a customer, I mean, we purchase raw materials from them. We always target minimum cost. We already talked about this competence between the suppliers and the procurement guys. So in this regards, even if suppose a person is a critical supplier, and there are only one supplier in the globe, and he is supplying even to our competitors for that matter. So it is a very tricky game now. We cannot go and negotiate, or we cannot even start the discussions for some cost reductions for this year, because we have our target. Even though the industry is growing as well as inflation is affecting us, we will get a target of, okay, this year we need to reduce $5 million, $10 million in the overall spend, something like that. It's already complicated. Now they are giving some more complication to it. How P&G as a global conglomerate handles this particular situation? We cannot even take this data analysis and industry ideas, because even the competition is also very tight, and we cannot lose anything from the supplier. We cannot develop a new supplier. So in this scenario, you might have come across some experiences, and how did you tackle that?
Okay, so if I understand your question correctly, so you're saying we are buying a material or something which is only from one supplier, and they supply to everybody, whoever is in that business. So us, our competition, everybody. There is a constrained supply, or they can create a constraint. They control the market. So sometimes we have to eat a humble pie and accept whatever they ask for. So it happens but then generally speaking, we are also able to develop a partnership where we can grow to help them grow. Because another thing which we can provide is one thing which we, as I said earlier, we can take pride always in doing is fair dealing, helping our partners grow, caring about their business as in addition to caring about our own. So they know all of those things and they see our behaviors. So more often than not, they will give us that benefit of doubt, or give us that extra, a little bit better, say, treatment than they will give it to anybody else. That's something which will naturally happen, and I have seen that happening, and something which I also feel proud about, because the way we operate sometimes is not easy. Because when you are trying to stand by some principles, you end up having hurts, you end up having pressures, etc. But I know my management stands behind me when I'm standing by my principles or P&G principles. So, but that helps with those supply situations as well. Now, they can still give a damn. They can still say, I will charge you what I can, and it can happen. So in worst case scenarios, yep, whatever, if it is a material or service which is critical to our business, nobody else can do it, they charge something which will still keep our business profitable and we can keep serving our customers or consumers, we will buy. But we will like to work with them to see how can we help them in a way that it overall then helps deliver better value with them while they also keep growing. So we will try to find more opportunity with them to may not grow in for that side of the business, but something else. So we will always look for opportunities, but again, I'm giving you a very generic answer. But as I said, extreme, we take it.
There is no second thought. I mean, if there is scenario demanding certain things to be strict, I mean, we need to go by that industry flow, correct?
Correct. And then there can be another scenario that sometimes we have exclusivity with them. Like we are exclusive to them and they are exclusive to us for that material. That is also possible. In that case, you can imagine they can still charge anything to us because that's probably an important material for us, right? So an important, whatever, raw material, pack material, whatever it is. But generally speaking, I also see that suppliers who are in the long-term game, they don't try to take advantage. Means, yes, they are in the business of making money. Yes, they have to grow their top line, bottom line, everything. They are answerable to their board. They're answerable to Wall Street, everything. But most of the companies which last are also trying to become long-term players. And then they like to partner with various companies like P&G. And there are so many great companies like P&G, which they would like to. If they do not show the right behaviors, they will not grow beyond a point. That's my philosophical thought. And then everybody wants to grow, right? Like Peloton bike comes and now it was only a bike. Now they have treadmills and everything. If they had not launched those products, their stock market price would not have gone up, right? When they launched the treadmills, their stock price was rewarded. It went up, it shot up. So why, if somebody had just stuck to that product and then maybe had a patent and gave as consumers a hardball and charged like $5,000 for that amazing bike, if they kept on doing that at one point of time, Srinivas will think, I don't like this bike anymore, right? But they don't do that, right? They've created value options, they created more product lines, etc. So they are there to serve. So such companies are then fundamentally good companies to them who survive. So a Peloton is my personal example, but yeah, you can think of many such cases where if the company thought of their customer to be the center of their thinking, they will not do negative behaviors with that customer. You know, like Mahatma Gandhi, remember that your customer is the reason of your existence. They are not an inconvenience. They are the reason of your existence. So that thought is like we learn through our growing up years, but those things are now quoted in many management educational seminars now. But that's a basics fundamental thing which works. So I know I'm getting philosophical now, but but we learned that through our growing up years in India, right? So
absolutely. Sometimes these philosophies help a lot when we discuss with the suppliers, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it does, and ultimately, every company has a business philosophy that, like, for example, it's for our company, it is more about how do we improve lives of more people genuinely with our products, and each and every individual can take pride in the products that they make, and they will recommend that product to their own family. So that is the kind of products we make. So that is our core philosophy: the high quality products, so that our consumers are themselves would want to reward us with their business. So that is the core to our own philosophy, right? So that's something which it helps. And I'm not saying this is true for many companies, like Apple, for that matter. Go around, you will know so many brands which have kept consumers to the center of their business philosophy. They respect their consumer, and they keep coming up with better and better products which improve the lives. In like an iPhone in 2007 just it changed the life of everybody in the world, right? Not only by that device, but the other devices which got created with that innovation. So it's the to you back to your question about if there is a supplier who is then doing that behavior, and I'm telling you there have been, I know about some, but largely speaking, partnerships do get developed. People do come together and collaborate for a longer term win-win for both. That's my general take. There are very few examples I know of in my career that where suppliers just kept on playing hardball and never came into a collaborative mindset. I barely remember any.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much, Karan. On behalf of this Informs NCSU fraternity, we are definitely delighted because most of the discussions, what happened today, we will not see in the classroom discussions as well as in the textbooks. I mean, we are again thankful. We will welcome you once again if there is some good occasion to come back and connect. And for all the participants, thanks for joining today. We have excellent sessions lined up for next week. Using C++ to solve optimization problems. There is going to be a direct online tutorial on Thursday. And on Friday, Dr. Mohan is going to give the role of logistics during this COVID situation. So you guys are welcome to register and do participate next year. Thanks a lot and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Have a nice weekend. Nice long weekend. Enjoy. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.